Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here for this sad event, but which, as we also know, always has a beautiful and celebratory aspect to it, because it gives us an opportunity to reflect on the accomplishments of two wonderful human beings. It gives an opportunity to reflect on their impact on us, and to reflect on to what extent we live up to the model that we clearly see in them. I think I, along with many others, have really rarely seen the death of a person, especially a retired person, have such an impact on the community. Something that reverberated not just through our College of Urban and Public Affairs, not just the university, but the city as a whole. The number of times with which various ones of us received the sad news that Monday evening. The number of people that we run into in town who want to talk to us about, I only saw him a week ago. I only had lunch with him so recently. Oh, we were just talking about this. That sense of really disbelief that how could somebody that we were so recently in touch with suddenly not be there anymore. And of course, this speaks to their tremendous role here in the institution and in the city, the power of their personality, including the comments about the way that some people could just be a tad intimidated at times by Nohad especially. I think we all have stories about that. But they were powerful people. As you know, everybody here knows this, Nohad was a distinguished professor of urban studies and planning, the dean emeritus of our College of Urban and Public Affairs, a native of Egypt, a degree in architecture from the University of Cairo, a master's degree in city planning from Berkeley, and a PhD from University of Pennsylvania. He was the first planning director of the Greater Cairo region. And in 1972, he came to Portland State from Columbia University to direct the Urban Studies program. He led the expansion of disciplines, and if Nohad was good at anything, it was to expand, that led to the creation of the College of Urban and Public Affairs, and he served as its first dean from 1976 to 2004, an amazing run for somebody who, no doubt, had so many opportunities to go on and do other things, and who remained committed to this college and this university. Dirce, of course, who was an architect and planner in her own right, a Fulbright Scholar, who helped in so many ways, and who I think also helped at times humanize Nohad to many people as well, and in whose name the CUPA library is now named. I want to, there are going to be a lot of other people speaking, so I'm not saying anything very long, but I want to take this opportunity to present posthumously and give it to Mariam and Omar, the Presidential Medal, which is given out on only very rare occasions to people who have made particular contributions to the university. And I was actually surprised to find out that it hadn't been given to Nohad before, because it should have been. So late, nevertheless, making up for that now, I want to present the Presidential Medal in memory of Nohad Toulan, scholar and founder of the College of Urban and Public Affairs, distinguished professor and dean emeritus, internationally recognized urban planner, visionary of intentional cities and regions, bridge builder across communities and faiths. May I present it to you? I now turn it over to Connie Ozawa.
Good afternoon. My name is Connie Ozawa. I'm the director of the Toulans School of Urban Studies and Planning. My personal relationship with Nohad and Dirce began a short 19 years ago. Dr. Toulan was the dean who hired me, tenured me, and promoted me, and most importantly, who taught me about the deep responsibility that we as faculty have for our students, our colleagues, the university, and our community. I will be forever grateful to him, and I am honored to introduce today's speakers. First, Paul Niebank will help us begin our reflections with a few words of spiritual encouragement. Upon Nohad Toulan's initiative, Paul served Portland State as visiting distinguished professor of urban studies and planning from 1993 to 1999. He brought an adventurous approach to community-based, student-led, and interdisciplinary education across the campus. Paul's friendship with Dirce and Nohad goes back half a century. Paul.
Good afternoon. I'm here to offer a blessing. And I want to do that in several respects, and I expect to make it really quite personal. First, what's obvious? Let's hold ourselves in stillness on behalf of Mariam and Omar. Bless you too. May you have prosperous, happy, and healthy lives. And may you learn to give as much to the world and to your faith as your parents did. Now, to Dirce and Nohad, I do go back half a century with both of them, as does my wife. We were all four students at the University of Pennsylvania in various sectors of the city planning program together simultaneously, which means that we're just about the same ages. And I was in a correspondence with Nohad, that is oral correspondence with him a great deal in those days. We used to meet with what happened to be a set of Egyptian students and a set of Israeli students and a few other students, but only one, as I remember, American Anglo-Saxon student, namely myself. And I felt very privileged to be in their midst. Persons of substantial sophistication and knowledge of the world and willingness to share that with me. Well, I was a wise guy then, I'm a wise guy now. And one time I went in to our meeting, which was held in the, on a regular basis for lunch in the women's dormitory cafeteria, which was a very comfy place and a place you could hang out all afternoon, and sometimes we did. And I went in and I said the truth that I had a dream. A dream that was like this. I saw a sphere in front of me, a very large sphere, 20 feet across, something like that. And the sphere was, as I understood it, contained the truth that I sought. And I went to these folks and I said, guess what? I had this wonderful dream. Well, what did you do? Well, I looked around and I couldn't find any signs on it, indications of what to do. You mean you didn't even try to get in to find the truth? What kind of a scholar are you? And then I said, oh yes, I did go this far. I went to the skin of it and I pressed in, and then I woke up from the dream. Oh, what a chicken. So I said, you know, I took it back, and I came back and I had a smarter idea. I said, everybody has their own sphere, and everybody has to penetrate their own sphere of truth and find it for themselves. And I think each of us here has a sphere of truth. Don't you think so too? I said, Paul, go back to where you were and enter the sphere, blast it all. And you know what you're going to find? And this was Nohad. Paul, you know what you're going to find? You're going to find us inside the sphere, searching for truth together. Well, this was a first of his many prophetic statements. I remember him very well, leaning back, so evidently casually, but full of energy and enthusiasm for life and good humor. Oh my goodness, did he have good humor. And he would pontificate. Even at age 30, he pontificated. I suppose he's pontificated when he was 5. Well, and the other, Dirce was with us on these occasions. I shouldn't push the Nohad button too hard because Dirce was there and very much a participant as he was. Her contribution was something like a whisper, though. A whisper. You know, she would tell Nohad, don't you want to be nicer to Paul? No. So this whisper and this boom, 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 regular rhythm of conversation. And she embraced us. She would lean forward in a gentlest way and embrace us while he sat back and pontificated. That's how it was. It was glorious. And then decades went by. Linda and I had precious little contact with them, and then all of a sudden I had decided to leave my good position at the University of California and come to the University of Washington. And I came halfway, so to speak, and got tripped up by Nohad. He said, Paul, I've been wondering when you would come north. Come here. Well, he gave me a good deal. Thank you, Michael Reardon, for half of it. I had 2 bosses, and each of them tolerated me very well. But I came here not because of the deal, but because of Nohad and our friendship. There is a easygoing song that most of you have at least heard, and probably all of you could sing better than I, that brings home what I'm talking about. It has a song, it's a long song. I won't ask you to tolerate my singing all of it. It has 2 verses, 3 choruses, a bridge, and a coda, or tag. I'll pick a little out of the middle. It goes, if the sky above you grows dark and full of clouds, and that old north wind begins to blow, get yourself together and call my name out loud. Soon you'll hear me knocking at your door. You just call out my name, and I know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Yes, come along. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call, and I'll be there, yes I will. You've got a friend, you've got a friend. Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? Ain't it good to know you've got a friend. Ain't it good to know? Nohad was my friend. Dirce was my friend. They called, and I came.
I told Paul not to make me cry. He made me laugh, and he actually did make me cry. But we can get beyond that because we have many more speakers who have many more warm memories that they will share with us. So the next two that I would like to introduce will share their memories of the Toulans in the early years when they first came to Portland. Sumner Sharp will talk about Nohad and the beginnings of the School of Urban Studies and Planning, and Ethan Seltzer will talk about the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies. Sumner Sharp is a faculty member in the School of Urban Studies and Planning, or has been a faculty member in the School of Urban Planning since 1987, and Ethan Seltzer he was the founding director of the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies, a former director of the Toulans School of Urban Studies and Planning, and a current faculty member in the School of Urban Studies and Planning here at Portland State since 1992. So, Sumner.
So if they fall down, pick me up.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Do not bird watch. Thanks. Thanks, Connie. I've been asked to speak about the early days, and I thought I'd spend some time sort of refreshing all of our memories about what was here before Nohad came and then what happened in the early years that he was here. As you all know, Dirce and Nohad and Miriam and Omar came here in 1972. And I am certain that Nohad came here with a vision of the future of urban and public affairs, its role at Portland State University, and the role of the college and PSU in the Portland region and the state. When he arrived, and some of you who were here then, Ron Cease and others, and Chuck Bolton, remember this, so please do not hesitate, don't boo too much if I miss it. This is my recollection. When he arrived, his was already in place. There was an undergraduate interdisciplinary urban studies certificate program that started in the early 1950s. There was an urban studies center that was started in the mid-1960s. The PhD and MUS degree programs were approved in 1970, and they were one of 3 interdisciplinary programs, PhD programs, that were key to Portland State College becoming Portland State University. The Black Studies and Criminal Justice programs, faculty and staff, were part of that mix. And all of us were crowded into Harder House. If you know where Harder House is, and I remember very nicely, is Don Clark here? Don Clark and I think Lee Brown shared a desk. That's my recollection. Yeah, we were crowded. And in addition to all of us, there was in Harder House in the basement a group of people looking at the future of metropolitan governance. A. McKay Rich was running that, and several planners were there from the state who provide planning assistance to cities and counties throughout the state. So that's where we began. I'm not certain, but I think that in 1972, we all moved to Harder House. Just Francis Manor, excuse me, somewhere around then, after Nohad came. In a few short years is what happened. The PhD program took shape under Nohad's guidance, and new faculty were added to support the program, and jointly appointed faculty came over and shared space at Francis Manor, as well as their home base. The Institute in Aging was formed and started. The undergraduate certificate program was rejuvenated and received both faculty and staff support from Nohad. The Masters of Urban Planning, now Urban and Regional Planning, was developed and approved by the state system I think, 76. I think we submitted in 75. And Nohad, the Urban Studies Center research and funding program expanded. So the Urban Studies Center expanded greatly in those years. And Nohad became Dean of the School of Urban Studies. Notice it wasn't a college yet. It was a School of Urban Studies. And some of us said he was born to be a dean. He's been called a visionary by many, but he also was a determined implementer and builder. I think he was a master strategist, and I suspect a very tough negotiator. He was thinking about how to get things done and was always on top of his to-do list, get it done. For example, our discussions often revolved around budget issues and how the lack of budget affected the program and his ideas for the school and the college. But right after that, and more often than not, he announced the new programs, or he announced new staff positions. And somewhere, he put it together. He found it in different places and put it together. And even in difficult and budgetary times. And I think he was always looking for opportunities. That's the way I would put it. And he was a very patient person. As you know, he was dean for 25 years. Think about that, staying in place for 25 years and making it happen. He always was ahead. I think he was always ahead of the curve. He was thinking about what the next steps could be for the college, the nascent college, and what it might look like and how it might be configured. He also, in addition to the big picture, tended to details and appearances, shaping the image of this collection of academic and research efforts at both its programmatic and physical manifestations. Keep in mind the building that the school's now in, the college is now in, was very much his college, and I think Tom Hacker's going to talk about that. He had a keen awareness to the pushes and sensitivity to the pushes and pulls of academic and state politics, and he was never chary about expressing his opinions. And he was a terrific and committed teacher and mentor. In addition to his academic achievements, he was a respected professional planner, a practitioner, a member of the American Institute of Planners College of Fellows, and was actively engaged in shaping and commenting on planning activities, programs, and policies at the local, regional, and state levels. As an aside, much later, he and I were members of a group, I think Arnold Kogan's here and he was one of them, member of a group called the GOP, the Good Old Planners, who met irregularly, I think they still meet irregularly, and discussed the state of planning in the region and the state, as well as the state of each other. Finally, I'm sure that it was not just Nohad's, but a vision that he and Dirce shared as partners. Both had a commitment to the college and the university, and theirs was a very close, respectful, and loving relationship. And when Nohad and I met while I was at PSU and then after I left and he retired, we would still meet, and there were always three topics that we discussed. One was the future of the college and PSU. Second was planning practice and policies at the local, regional, state level. And finally, and not least, our families and how everyone was faring and what they were doing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to everyone for coming. Memory helps make a community, and it certainly helps to comfort community members, and it's really wonderful to see everyone who is here today. Thanks too to Mariam and Omar. Lives are rarely made alone. They're made with contributions and with the help and with the support of many, many people. Really want to extend my thanks for the time that we had over 4 decades, the time from your mom, from your dad, and from both of you. All of you have given us what we have here today, and I really appreciate that and want to pass that on. We wouldn't be here without the gift of time made by the Toulan family. I've been asked to speak a little bit about the history of the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies. And there's a really interesting story about that, number of things that I'll say about that, but I just want to start with, first of all, acknowledging all of the board members who have been here. Bill Scott, who is the founding board member, Dr. Elizabeth Kutza, who was the interim director before I got hired as the first permanent director. A lot of hands went into this. Fred Rosenbaum, Mark Rosenbaum is here. And one of the very first things that we had to deal with at the first board meeting of the Institute was that if you think about the acronym for the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies, it rankled a number of members of our board as perhaps lending the wrong tone to the operation. Not that there's anything wrong with it or anything, but it just, might get people thinking of something other than public policy. And so with a wink and a nod, thanks to Nohad, we changed the acronym to IMS, which it is to this day. Nohad was always there for everything we had to do. Long before Portland State had embraced its urban mission, Nohad was working with others at Portland State to create the community-based service learning-oriented mission for which PSU is known nationally. As some of you in the room will remember, when Joe Blumel was appointed president of Portland State in 1974, there was a seminal retreat that was held because at the time the idea was that the new presidency would be marked by a commitment to community engagement and to the relationship between Portland State and the university. In that respect, Portland State, Nohad, the people who were here were decades ahead of the curve on community engagement and the engaged university, even before we knew what to call it, actually, in many ways. There was a retreat down at Salishan, and one of the things that came out of that was something called Vital Partners and the Vital Partners Declaration, which was a formal relationship between Portland, Multnomah County, and Portland State University, and particularly Multnomah County and Portland State. And if Don Clark were here, Don Clark was absolutely essential to that relationship, and it was all about creating a standing, formal relationship between the faculty and the students at Portland State and the needs of this community and the way in which scholarship could help make this a stronger, better community for everybody. Vital Partners was instrumental in kind of that moment. Nohad was instrumental in developing Vital Partners, and Vital Partners would link Portland State to area governments and communities in a very important way. But Vital Partners came to an end, basically at the close of the 1970s. A lot of things kind of came to the end with the close of the 1970s. As those of you might remember, we were surfing the waves and continued to surf the waves of the economy. Things are up, things are down. There's a lot of things that kind of came to a crunch in the late 70s and early 80s around here. One of them was Vital Partners. But Nohad didn't stop working on this idea. And in 1987, he convened representatives from the city of Portland, Metro, and Multnomah County to talk about, son and daughter of Vital Partners, what could come next. And the idea was to create an institute. There ought to be an institute that would sponsor and fund public service research, facilitate an exchange of information and transfer of technology, and provide a forum for public officials and citizens to discuss policy issues. This was in 1987. In 1989, Governor Neil Goldschmidt created the Governor's Commission on Higher Education in the Portland Metropolitan Region, another mouthful of an acronym, but what it really spoke to was the idea that Portland State at this stage, that stage in its evolution, had to take the step to become something more intentional, something more unique, and something which fit the nature of this institution and this community. And what that commission settled on was that Portland State should become what they called at the time an urban grant university or an urban university. And we were very fortunate at that moment, in 1989, and soon after, to welcome Judith Romali here as our president, who took that idea and ran with it, first with the 1991 strategic plan and then with what became known as the Portland Agenda, 5 key initiatives to implement the urban university mission to bring Portland State into the world as an intentional place linked to its community to do things collaboratively and together. This was an important moment. And again, before anyone had this notion of an urban university, and one of the notions that Judith and Nohad worked together on and that Judith welcomed into the fold of the Portland Agenda, those 5 seminal activities, was the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies, which I'm happy to say is the one initiative which continues to this day, some 20 years later. You should smile, Bill, because you had a lot to do with that, and that's a good thing. Armed with the support of the university and the Oregon University system to fund and create the Institute, it was really kicked off with an important $100,000 commitment from the city of Portland, and at that point Mayor Bud Clark, who helped to legitimize the role for the Institute. Probably one of the most important aspects of the Institute, and I think this is a real reflection of Nohad's perception of these things, is that it had an external board on which no faculty or administrator had a vote. And understand that too was kind of heresy at that point in the evolution of these things. But classically, an expression of Nohad's commitment to the idea that this was about the university extending a hand in trust to the community. This was not about creating any other kind of relationship other than one based on parity. The Dean of the College of Urban and Public Affairs, Nohad, sat on the board in an ex officio role, but there again was no vote. This was very much, I think, in his spirit and had a lot to do with what he'd had in mind. So what can we learn from all this? Well, first of all, good things take time. Good things take time. The Institute unfolded over 20 years. Nohad was at it for 20 years, and it's been in existence now for more than 20 years. If the ideas are good and the funding isn't there, you have to be in it for the long haul. And I think Nohad would remind us of that today if he was here with us. Second, Nohad's work and his relationship with all of us. And I got to say, for 25 years of working with Nohad, I always felt like a deer in the headlights. You know, I wasn't sure if I could get a smile out of him. But you know, when I did, it was so rewarding. But his work was emblematic of some extremely important things. Stay true to your values. Stay true to your goals. Stay true to your friends and allies and colleagues. Stay true to the place that you're in, but be prepared to change your plans, tactics, and timing. But be prepared to change your plans, tactics, and timing. And I think those are lessons kind of worth remembering, and I hope our planning students take them to heart. And then third, I think this is a really important part for me, especially appreciate the people you're with. I've rarely met anyone as loyal to those around him as Nohad. Nohad was a modern man. He developed a spreadsheet with 68,000 cells to model every conceivable outcome for the college. And Victoria Gilbert knows that there were 68,000 cells in that spreadsheet. And I remember, Mariam and Omar, your father telling me that there were 68,000 cells in that spreadsheet, every one of them personally crafted to play a particular role in modeling every conceivable outcome from absolutely dire and you would not want to be there to the most amazing sunshiny day. Everything was in there. He's an intensely modern guy, but he never lost sight of the necessity for creating and maintaining and valuing relationships made one at a time and face to face. We're all in this together. If there is one central notion to the Institute, it's that we, in this region, all share a common fate. And for Nohad, that operated at the intensely personal scale of a friendship and on up to the much more ethereal scales of region, state, and nation. And we should aspire to do no less. Thank you.
I'm going off script here, so it's a little dangerous. But I just want to thank Sumner and Ethan. I think they're guides for us into the early years of Nohad's professional life here are very inspiring and really drew out some very profound lessons that I think we should hold with us as we move forward. But the story doesn't end, right? Nohad, and one other thing is that I think that the stories that that Sumner and Ethan told us reflect how important it was that Nohad was here, but how important it was that he was working with others, right? And that's something that Nohad was a great connector. No one person does everything, and that's the inspiration for us, I think. But Nohad's contribution does not end with the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies. It continues on, and we have 2 additional speakers now who will talk about the next phases of Nohad's work. So first we'll have Thomas Hacker, who will talk about, I better read my notes here. Okay, because I did skip it, didn't I? Yes, okay, sorry. So first we'll have Michael Reardon, who will talk about the impact that Nohad's work made on Portland State University. Michael Reardon has more than 40 years of service to Portland State, including 7 years as provost and vice president, as well as a more recent role as interim president between 2007 and 2008. Michael will talk about the creation of the College of Urban and Public Affairs. After Michael, we will hear from Lindsay DeRoche, former vice president of finance and administration and current faculty member in the Hatfield School of Government in CUPA. And Lindsay will talk about Nohad's plan for the university district. So first, Michael Reardon.
Durham and Omar, good afternoon. I've been asked to talk about the development of the college. Much of that development you've already heard discussed in the previous speakers. So let me start with a different sort of observation. On the back of your program, you'll see this wonderful portrait of Nohad standing in front of a door. For a moment, I want to talk about the door. You saw this door in an earlier picture of Francis Manor. Many of you know the story of this door, but it's always worth repeating. When Francis Manor was torn down, Nohad and Dirce saved that door. The door was stored, kept for many, many years, ultimately to take its place on the 7th floor of the current building of the College of Urban and Public Affairs, where it's the entrance to the Dirce Toulan Library. And actually, to me, this is an emblematic story about the genius of Nohad and Dirce and the way they went about developing the College of Urban and Public Affairs, and through that, their contributions to the development of Portland State. Think for a moment that he saw in this door something to be preserved that ultimately would take its place in something that was years in the future in terms of its realization. He had the insight and the commitment to do that. So I would urge all of you from time to time, if you haven't seen it or when you see it, to think about that door and think of Nohad standing in front of that door and what it says about the real administrative genius and leadership of Nohad Toulan. In terms of the development of the college, basically it is a very straightforward story. As you've been told, beginning in 1974, there was, through President Blumel's announcement, of the move towards defining us as an urban university. That year also saw the putting together of a proposal to create the School of Urban and Public Affairs. And from that, step by step, program by program, Nohad brought together in a bricolage fashion all of these elements to form what became one of the paramount institutions for us in defining Portland State as an urban university. So that today, the college, and here I'll simply read you some basic data, of Urban and Public Affairs, which was established in 1976, consists of 3 schools, 5 research and public service centers and institutes. But it also has emerged as an absolutely vital part of defining the concept of the urban university. And here also, not only did Nohad bring together these programs, develop new ones. But he did it in the way that's already been mentioned. And it's one of the things about him that I found most impressive over the years. Nohad always understood that Portland State was developing around opportunities that were not necessarily foreseen or planned. And he himself looked for those opportunities, took advantage of them, looked for others that others should take advantage of, and through that process built a truly amazing institution. And it was an important lesson about the development of Portland State. As Ethan said recently in an article that appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education, it was development on the margins. This recognizing opportunities, recognizing that door that should be saved over many years before it ultimately would be placed in an important position in a new building and in a considerably expanded intellectual and educational institution. But Nohad not only envisioned that in terms of the mission of the Urban University to the region, to the city, but globally. And I would like to also emphasize this aspect of what he himself achieved and what he encouraged for Portland State. To realize that to develop the city in which we were located, we also needed to bring to it an international and global perspective. And he was a great advocate of international practice and education, not simply recruiting foreign students to come here or establishing faculty exchanges, but looking for programs that actually brought Portland State involved in other parts of the world. And I, at the moment, have a rather unique opportunity to see the results of that. I've been living for 3 years in Vietnam in an institution that is new and in the middle of an entirely new city that's being built just south or just north of Ho Chi Minh. And every day that I'm there, in fact, I think about Nohad and the way that he saw the role of education, the city, the development of community, all of these very comprehensive aspects, not only in our immediate region, but as I say, also on a global perspective. And what is very remarkable, if you experience it today, is to realize that if you go to Japan or China or Vietnam or Thailand or the Middle East, Portland State is a known entity, and it is frequently looked to as a model for the kind of institutions that many in these parts of the world are attempting to build and to develop. I see much of this as a fulfillment and the actualization of the vision that the Toulans brought when they came to Portland State and in their many years of service and commitment to the institution. Thank you.
Connie didn't ask for the box, but I did. She's about a half an inch taller than me, I think. A little more than that? Oh, darn. Wrong again. I want to start just a little bit differently. I want to start a little more abstractly. I was trying to think how to talk about this man. So I'm going to start this way. A person looks around and sees the world. And that person is naturally endowed with a clear eye. He observes the world carefully and with realism. He strives to understand the nature of the environment, both physical and human. He uses his keen, curious, brilliant mind and asks, how do the physical environment and human society interact? Does our place where we exist in the physical world enhance our community, our human community? He uses his assembled knowledge and experience, and he asks what principles and values should drive humans in the use of their physical environment. How might society better enjoy, employ, and preserve the natural environment? And do we have a sense of place that lays the foundation for our community? He's also a man with a great heart, a great sense of fairness. He asked, does our community, the place we've created, work for everyone? And can we make it better for the whole community? And as he is a man with leadership instincts, he asks, what must we change? How can we change it? How do we move forward regardless of our natural inclination to be lazy, to stay in the comfort zone? He cultivates a character as a strategic leader, a leader who knows when to act and who to pursue. And he's patient and wise in his strategy to advance his convictions among his fellow citizens. He is a guiding spirit for many leaders who are involved in the change process. And over many, many years, he stays true to his convictions and his agenda. He's a touchstone. Thank you. He's a touchstone for others whenever critical turning points arise. So you've probably guessed that I am describing Nohad Toulan. And I've just described from my perspective why and how he played such a critical role here in the creation of not just the academic community, but in this place we call the university and the university district for over 30 years. Oh, by the way, one further characteristic of this man is he just happens to be a great mentor to those, including myself, I think Ethan, I think Connie, so many others, who have had important responsibilities in the university. He was a soft-spoken, understated man, very serious at times, but he had an indomitable presence that quietly permeated any room, especially the Council of Deans, any room that he occupied, and with just a few words, he conveyed his message. And I was the grateful beneficiary of such a message in 1991 when I first got here. I walked the university area, some 50 blocks, several times, just to try to understand the place, to absorb it, to get the ambiance, to see what the challenges were going to be for this university. Well, my reaction was, Portland State sits in what would charitably be called a transition neighborhood. Now remind, this is 1991. Many old buildings, scanty retail, a little bit of old student housing, bus transportation, but a real sense of isolation from everything above Market Street, the Maginot Line, it used to be called. As it stood, the core university was established downtown in the early 50s and 60s on the beautiful park blocks where we sit right now, where the earliest buildings were either acquired or built. But by the 90s, enrollment growth was just over the top. And PSU's faculty and students were tightly squeezed in the buildings on this park blocks. When I joined PSU, it was because a great president, Judith Ramele, who sits right there, asked me to join and to work with her and a new team she was putting together. And I agreed to take on several top tasks that the president and I talked about. The one which most interested me was not budget reductions, which is current again, by the way. But we did attend to that. We did attend to it. My hope was to take on the challenge of planning the university campus future with the city of Portland. Clearly, the campus would never have walls of any kind around it, hardly ivy walls. It would have to be, continued to be integrated in the urban landscape. That reflected the overall theme the president was reaching for. And top on the agenda had to be more academic buildings, renewed and new ones, as well as better housing for the students and more retail services. The light rail and the streetcar were launching. We had to be in that mix, be part of that. But most important, the university needed community recognition for the vital importance of its mission. The challenges were clear. Enter Nohad. I'd met Nohad in the search process which brought me to the campus. He was on the search committee. He was very serious in that search committee. So it was natural to find some initial time together when I arrived on the campus, and that time flowered into a most productive partnership, and lucky for me, I experienced one of the great mentor relationships of my career. Nohad had already gained his reputation for greatness as a city planner and an educator of city planners. His influence in the entire Portland community and well beyond was already well established. That alone made him an essential partner for what we were going to try to do. While Nohad was an academic, however, he proved a very wise politician as well. I learned in our first meeting, this was the message, in our first meeting that in 1988, when the Central City Plan for Portland was renewed, he quietly managed to slip into the plan the notion of a university district. Just one little sentence in there, I think, one or two. Fortunately, we saw eye to eye. He had planted the seed for this very discrete thing called the university district. The idea was that if we were to be an urban research university, the campus itself must express the values of good urban development. Very simple. We saw eye to eye on this point. So fortunately, when it came time to select a campus citizen to chair the planning committee for the university district, there was only one name that made sense, and that was Nohad. I asked him to chair that committee. He did a wonderful job working with persons inside and outside of the university. This first committee created the first district plan, which has been modified many, many times subsequently. I accepted this report. The president approved the report, and we all moved forward. But Nohad's work did not begin and end with the actual planning. I said he was a partner, and indeed his great working knowledge of the city of Portland assisted the president and I in each step we took along the way. Nohad would provide wise counsel. Where would we find support? Portland Development Commission, city planning, those were pretty good, but there were several other places we needed to look. Where do we need to work harder? He always had some interesting information and good ideas about that. It was a great partnership, and we did succeed in 1995 to gain the approval of the city council when Vera Katz was mayor. In subsequent years, I can attest that Nohad continued to partner and mentor those who were responsible to develop and nurture this district, down to today when President Vivell is presiding over the development of the successor education district, now including OHSU's waterfront. What counted was Nohad's commitment, his stewardship over a long period of time, making this campus a more suitable and emblematic home for the great urban university and community it was becoming. Nohad, who would likely shy from the statement I'm going to make, was a great man. He was a spiritual father of the university district, a mentor to many PSU leaders for 4 decades actually, and also a very real nurturer of generations of urban planners and academics. Finally, he was truly a loving human being, and one memory that I have always stays with me about him, and that was that in every meeting I ever had with Nohad, he always mentioned Dirce, always, his wonderful wife. Theirs was a deep and powerful relationship, and he was very proud of and loved her very much. That moved me. So for me, when a person passes away, it hurts. It brings on sadness, and I feel sad about this. But then gently and certainly, it fosters gratitude for the many ways in which he helped make my life meaningful and for the lessons I learned from him. So this brings me a semblance of peace, and I hope that you share that peace with me. Thank you.
I think it's the heels on my shoes. So 2 key elements. So thank you, Lindsay and Michael, for those, for taking us through those years and those aspects of Nohad and Dirce's contributions to us. Very helpful. So two key elements that have not been spoken of yet that are part of Nohad's legacy here at Portland State were the building of the Urban Center and supporting students in the college. Thomas Hacker, the principal architect of the Urban Center project, will speak about his work with Nohad on this impressive endeavor, and he will be followed by Annette Jolin, a former student of Nohad's, who went on to serve as a faculty member in the college, in the criminology and criminal justice department. Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to start with a little story that I had not thought of telling because I didn't know about it. But when Paul Niebank was talking about the group of them at the University of Pennsylvania in the women's dormitory, it turns out that I actually worked in the women's dormitory in the cafeteria at the time they were there as a freshman in the college. And I always wondered who that strange group of people were who would sit there all afternoon drinking coffee and talking about God knows what. So thank you for that memory. What struck me most about working with Nohad Toulan to create the Urban Center at Portland State was his almost sphinx-like composure. He had such a stable and such a quiet presence that I often wondered if he cultivated that demeanor as a cultural link back to his beloved Egypt. Nohad was a man with a fundamental confidence in his perceptions of what is strong and what is lasting in the culture and the commerce of the city. He was rigorous, he was intellectually brilliant, but what distinguished him most to me was his ability to see the intrinsic beauty in the human order, in that kind of entanglement that we have with urban life. He had an almost instinctual sense of how to guide that human order forward into the future in subtle and often amazingly transforming ways. His vision for the Urban Center, the new home of the College of Urban and Public Affairs, was a much larger version for the university district as a whole. He recognized that PSU's greatest asset is being a vital part of one of the great urban environments in the world. He wanted PSU to grow as an active force in that city, not an inward-focused Park Blocks academy, but an outward force for the future integration of the university with the immense human resource that this city offers. As we worked together, and we worked very closely together, to translate his vision into a vibrant urban architecture, he was steadfastly supportive and deeply perceptive. When he wanted to make a point or share an opinion, he would draw you aside individually. You were shaking in your boots, Ethan. I was shaking in my boots, too. And he would say something to you in a very low, melodious voice that caused you to listen very carefully and to take his thoughts very seriously. He believed in his vision, and he let us know in many subtle ways as architects that he also believed in our collective ability to achieve it. If you were here before the Urban Center, before the plaza, before the University District that Lindsay talked about, the streetcar, the MAX, the bus mall, the new bus mall and MAX line, and the commercial and social vitality that's been invested into that area, you know what a fundamental transformation the urban center has provided this community. It has changed the face of the university in an elemental way, and it has become truly the front door of the university. The university has grown and become a very visible player in the urban scene, and its influence and its attractiveness continues to grow as literally thousands of people every day go by and through the urban plaza and the urban center that Nohad inspired. In the several years that I worked with him to design and build the center, through all the ups and downs of neighborhood meetings, of planning reviews, of the sometimes really maddening vicissitudes of the financing of the project, I never once saw Nohad waver in his belief in that vision of what this place could be and in its value to the future of the city. What an amazing sense of composure it takes to keep that kind of balance. And what a great love and respect he shared with his lovely wife, Dirce. We may never know again such quiet strength from these two inspired souls, but we should be forever grateful for their powerful legacy. Thank you.
My name is Annette Jolen, and I was asked to speak as one of the former students of Dr. Toulan. And while I won't be able to say I speak for all the students, I have put together some comments that probably are true for many of us. To speak before you today is an honor that has evoked both gratitude and sorrow, as I, like so many others, am trying to accept the finality of what brings us together. Dirce and Nohad Toulan no longer walk among us. My condolences to Mariam and Omar. In Smith Center, the very building where we are gathered today, only days before the accident, Dr. Toulan gave a talk on the problems currently in Egypt. He was nearly a decade into his retirement, and at age 81, when many others have retreated into their living rooms and recliner chairs, he remained fully engaged with the world, with our community, with our university, an institution to which Nohad and Dirce, as others who have spoken before me noted, have given so generously. I was fortunate to have been one of the many recipients of this generosity. Dr. Toulan was the most important and consistently supportive, positive influence in my professional career. I know there are many others here and abroad who would say the same if they stood before you today. And it is in us, our children and grandchildren, that he lives on. Perhaps we could call this, as Victoria Gilbert put it the other day, our inner Nohad, an inner Nohad who will be there forever to remind, and when needed, to admonish us, to be our best, to respect differences, and to work in pursuit of a common good. Since October 28th, my thoughts have gone back and forth, scanning the more than 30 years during which I have known Dr. Toulan as my advisor, Dean Toulan as my boss, and Nohad as my trusted supporter and fatherly friend. One theme kept coming up again and again, no matter the role. In one way or another, Nohad embodied a deep form of caring. I'm pretty sure that he would forgive my use of this gender-burdened concept. There are caring men, and Nohad was one of them. His caring took many forms. I know, for example, that he cared for students, faculty, and family. I also know he took care to be respectful, to be prepared, to be on time, to be impeccably dressed, to be there when needed. And I know that he took care of business, day-to-day minutiae and problems, as well as celebrations of all kinds. My list is obviously not exhaustive, but if everyone who knew Nohad completed as many sentences as possible, starting with, he cared for, he took care to, he took care of, the aggregate would most likely capture much of the depth and breadth of this remarkable man. In closing, let me share a couple personal experiences to illustrate what I just described. In 1982, I was admitted to the Urban Studies Criminology PhD program. Dr. Toulan, I was informed, was my advisor. As I later found out, this was not a coincidence. He reasoned, correctly I might add, that a 37-year-old single head of household with 2 school-aged children and a work history that included flight attendant and police officer could only succeed under a stern and watchful eye. This, I might add, was the tough love part of caring I forgot to mention earlier. His expectations were high, but his rules were straightforward. In 4 years, I had a PhD and a tenure-track position at Syracuse University, and Urban Studies added 1 more graduate to its roster. Years later, back at Portland State University, I was the chair of the Criminology and Criminal Justice Division, and Dr. Toulan was my dean. As in the past, his expectations were high, and his support in working toward a common goal. This time, the academic and fiscal soundness of the College of Urban and Public Affairs never waned. I'm immensely grateful to Nohad, but I also know that his fortitude and his compassion were deeply rooted in his relationship with Dirce. And for that, my thanks will forever go to Dirce as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas and Annette. As these speakers have reminded us, Nohad Toulan had great faith in this university. The faith is captured also in a poem that he wrote in 1996. It's called, "I am 50 years old and I do not want to die." The poem depicts PSU as the younger, less favored sibling left in the shadows of her sister institutions, who simply would not give up. And I think the stories that we've heard here show that Nohad was a man also that would not give up. He didn't, and we are all grateful for that. This poem is included in the memory book that we have copies of here and would be available on the website. The influence of the Toulans extended far beyond Portland State University, however, and to talk about their work in the Portland community, Burl Yesalada will speak. He's a longtime friend of the Toulans. He happens to be a faculty member in the Hatfield School of Government and director of the Center for Turkish Studies. Following Burl, Melody Rose, the current chancellor of the Oregon University System and former chair of the Political Science Division in the Hatfield School, will introduce a video from Earl Blumenauer about the impacts that the Toulans had on the metropolitan area. Burl?
Thank you, Connie. Good afternoon, everybody. Miriam and Omar. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for my meeting with Nohad 15 and a half years ago. He was the person who convinced me to come, drop everything I was doing. And when he felt that I was on the fence, he said, "Let me show you where your office will be." So we went from East Hall to the construction site. We put on our hard hats, took the service elevator up to 6th floor, and he said, "Your office will be right here." And then we went back to his office, and he told me about his vision for the Hatfield School. And he said, "Come and help me." And that was it. And he became my friend. So did Dirce. And I'm here today to talk to you about my friends outside the university. I believe we lost one of the greatest couples that made our community a better place for us all. Nohad and Dirce Toulan were true bridge builders. And they accomplished this task in their personal as well as public lives. They didn't just talk the talk. A lot of people who do that. They also walk the walk. They were two giants who walked this earth and bettered the lives of everyone they met and everything they touched. Together, they were accomplished architects. I'm putting them together because you couldn't think of one without the other. Urban planners, educators, listeners. They had passion for history, culture, and the arts. On the personal level, through their lives, they showed us how a marriage of two individuals who came from two different countries, who spoke two different languages, and practiced two different religions could endure the challenges of this world and raise a beautiful and successful family. For nearly 50 years, Dirce and Nohad showed us how to make it work. Their devotion to each other was exemplary. They were true to their friends, and loyalty was the underwriting commitment. As a friend of the Toulans, you never questioned their loyalty. My wife Sue and I always looked upon Dirce and Nohad as an example. and referred to them when we discussed challenges of making an interfaith marriage work, when we talked about it with our children who are in interfaith marriages, and with our friends, and when we shared who the Toulans were, how devoted they were to their faiths, our friends' reactions were always like, "You're kidding." "Oh, yes." "No, it was real." Their decision to leave New York and Columbia University to come to Portland State in '72 is an example of devotion to one's family. And the underlying factor, he told me many times, which goes to the heart of caring for family, he said, "We did not want to raise our children in New York." Public bridges they sure built. You can find Nohad's mark everywhere, whether it is found in the Mecca, Cairo, or Portland. But Dirce was always by his side, always encouraging to pursue his dreams. He was one of Oregon's most influential Muslim and Arab leaders. This came to him naturally, as he had been one since his school days at Penn. When he was president of the Muslim Student Association in North America during the early 1960s, he shared with me a story about that time, that they were going to have a conference, I believe it was in Atlanta. And when the hotel told them they could not have black students stay there, he responded by informing the hotel management that Islam did not discriminate against individuals based on their color, and promptly canceled the conference and moved it somewhere else. Nohad and Dirce worked very hard to build a better understanding of religious communities in Oregon. And this was very important for them. And it became even more important after 9/11. We would have our usual meetings where he would call me and say, "Biro, it's time to have our talk," which meant I would listen for a very long lunch and occasionally have an input. And we would cover many topics. But this was important because they loved America. This was their adopted home, and they truly believed the opportunities you found here couldn't be found somewhere else. And he was worried that the impact of 9/11 will simply tear the fabric of our communities. So, with encouragement from Dirce, with whom they shared universal values of religion long before such ecumenism was popular, he went on to become founding member of several organizations: the Council of Arab and Muslim Organizations of Oregon and Southwest Washington, the Institute of Christian Muslim Understanding, the Arab, Jewish, and Muslim Dialogue, Arab and Muslim Portland Police Advisory Council, and the Muslim Educational Trust, where his vision defined its roadmap of success. And his vision was one where there would be a community center where everybody could come, setting aside their political bickering. And this is happening. This is under construction. The Trust and Education Center is in temporary location right now. Once completed, it would be fantastic. The Toulans worked very hard to build these bridges, and everybody acknowledged it and respected them. The movers and shakers of Oregon wanted to be seen with them. There's a picture of Nohad with the 5 governors. And yes, Senator was also a governor. And it's like everybody wants to be there to be seen with him. It's a fantastic picture. As one close friend said to me, and I quote, "Some people's memory never dies because their moral and political imaginations are naturally rooted in the living memory they leave behind. This is how Sue and I will remember Dirce and Nohad. Our deepest sympathies go to their children, Mariam and Omar, and to their families and relatives. May God help us endure their loss, and may they rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Melody Rose, and I want to thank you for the honor of being with you here. As we've learned this afternoon, Nohad and Dirce were a quiet force in communities near and far. Like many of you here in the room today, they changed my life forever when Nohad hired me, like Connie, almost 20 years ago. And over the past 2 decades, I have come to think of them both as ambassadors for the college and more profoundly for the extended family that they have created here in our beloved community. The impact on this couple on the higher education system in Oregon is truly profound. We see the physical manifestation of this impact in the urban center and plaza and Dirce's library with its gorgeous door that you've already heard about and that is pictured in the handout, salvaged from the Francis Manor. I myself have a piece of the stone from the building's construction that sits proudly on my desk. It's a constant and very appropriate reminder of the Toulans' fortitude, gravitas, perseverance, intellectual heft, and commitment to enduring and universal values. Their impact in these physical manifestations is indelible and will serve us as a comfort and reminder as we walk this place every day. The intellectual contributions are seen in every faculty member, staff, and student who has been engaged in the college. Knowledge developed there truly has served this city. No one has walked that motto more deliberately than the Toulans. Their reach spans literally thousands who today live values around sustainability, cross-cultural faith and community, and excellence because of the intellectual imprint that the college brings to bear. But the impact on the university community and beyond goes even deeper, I would argue, than the built environment and the intellectual rigor that these two brought us. Nohad and Dirce were ambassadors in our region in more intimate ways too. The quiet and sometimes steely leadership exhibited on our campus and on its behalf had profound personal lessons for many of us that equip us to lead in their wake and that challenge us every single day to reach for excellence. Nohad was a champion of his faculty. On more than one occasion, he defended my place in the college, urging me to take on greater leadership opportunities than perhaps I might have dared. He believed deeply in my ability, as that of so many others represented in this room and beyond. That belief was affirming, but it wasn't easy. His commitment was more than that, because for those of us who worked for Nohad, his abiding loyalty was also a very serious charge to us, to hold ourselves to higher standards, to work harder than anybody else, and to strive for more than we might have dreamed otherwise. And he would tell us when we fell short. Perhaps a quality that his grown children might affirm. Nohad didn't believe in that American cultural myth that everybody gets a trophy just for showing up. With Nohad, you were called to earn it. And he had a way of making us want to earn it. So I will always cherish Nohad's fierce loyalty and his high expectations for his faculty, the extended family he built in the college. Many of us in higher education leadership roles today model our behavior on Nohad's example. He set a high, high bar for us, and one worth striving for. On a personal note, I remember Nohad best as I would spot him strolling across campus, his hands in his pockets, a small smile, sometimes almost a smirk, emerging as he surveyed the scene, ever the urban planner. Quietly but intently, he would begin and end every single conversation I had with him in the same fashion. First, he would ask, "Melody, how are your children?" He knew my work was fine. Often he had more faith in my work than I did. He didn't have to ask about that. So we would discuss family, my children's development, and our shared love of this community. In the middle of the conversation was when he would offer an unsolicited and stern piece of advice, which I followed every single time because I never wanted to disappoint Nohad. And then the conversation would end, as it did every single time, with words that meant the world to me. "Melody, you are like a daughter to me." International cross-cultural ambassadors, yes. Regional planning and architecture giants, of course. Intellectual force to be reckoned with, absolutely. But perhaps best of all, ambassadors of family, arms open wide and full of high expectation, embracing the college community tightly like a daughter and demanding the best from her. Thank you, Mariam and Omar, for sharing your incredible parents with all of us. What a gift you have given to so very many and so generously. We will forever cherish this gift and will continue to hold ourselves to your parents' expectations in loving memory of them. Of course, our hearts go out to you at this time, and I hope that the presence and the outpouring of all of us here today in the campus community is a small, small comfort in this time of sorrow. At this moment, I'd like to invite you all to watch a special video message from Congressman Earl Blumenauer on the extended regional impact of this amazing pair. Thank you.
Our hearts go out to Miriam and Omar, to the extended Toulan family, and to their Portland State family, whose lives have been touched by the service and commitment of Nohad and Dirce Toulan. Indeed, Portlanders who never knew them have benefited from their presence in our community for almost 40 years. It was the Toulans, a unique power couple, not just in Portland, but with influence around the world. They were indeed an international couple, he from Egypt, she from Argentina, and they accepted international assignments, as when soon after Nohad had concluded his graduate work, becoming the first planning director of the Greater Cairo region. He'd been an advisor to the United Nations Development Program and to local and foreign governments. And of course, his 20-month assignment directing the preparation of the comprehensive regional plan for the holy city of Mecca. Amazing assignments for an amazing man. It was my honor to have met him when he first arrived in 1974. I was working in the president's office at Portland State University, and he began the critical chapter in the development of Portland State as a true urban university. It's hard to think of all the ways the Toulans contributed to the evolution of our once obscure continuing education center for returning veterans, to the establishment of a vital, strong, thriving university with particular expertise in urban studies. Dr. Toulan was a Renaissance man, a scholar, planner, academic leader, a force in the community for human rights, sound foreign policy, and protecting the planet. There's a reason his name graces the School of Planning and Public Policy at Portland State, because no one contributed more to the emergence of one of the outstanding academic outposts in America dealing with planning, livability, transportation, and how we knit these elements together for a better future. Nohad helped define the critical role that an urban university can play, not just as a place of instruction, but for research and a living library. Dirce, in her own right, was an accomplished professional. They met when she was a Fulbright Scholar. She didn't just support Nohad through his career, but she had strong academic and professional background and was greatly influential and respected at the university. It is no accident that hers is the name on the college library for public affairs. I worked directly for 2 Portland State presidents and have since worked with 4 more. Each put their imprint on the university, which is still being enhanced further under the stewardship of Vim Vival and his wife Alice. But over these last 40 years, I don't think anybody has done more for the evolution of the university and its role in our community and in the nation and in the world. We mourn the loss of this extraordinary couple, even as we celebrate their lives. Portland State University, our community, and the nation is a better place because of them. But I must add one further reflection on the sad closing of this brilliant chapter, and that is to focus not just on the academic, professional, important as it is, it's to lose the essential element that has become more important to me over the years, even as the formal phase of their career wound down. They were a true interfaith couple, and in an era, these last dozen years, of such international tensions and community stresses visited on us, theirs were voices of tolerance, reason, and compassion, who were vigorously opposed to discrimination and fierce champions of outreach, of connection, of respect for all. So for all the many contributions that will live on in urban affairs and the institution, they made a vital contribution to sane foreign policy, religious tolerance, and interfaith cooperation that's not going to be evidenced in the name of a college or library, but it's a message that was there when the community needed to hear it, and their example when the community needed to see it. And we are richer for that special gift.
Well, I would thank Earl, but I don't think he would hear me. But I do want to thank Burl and Melody for your very, very thoughtful and sensitive comments. They kind of bring to life Dirce and Nohad as people in their public and private lives, and the blurring of the two is really quite remarkable. Is something that I've been learning over the past couple of days, well, weeks. I want to acknowledge Mariam and Omar here in the front row, and also invite Omar up to the stage now. Thank you.
First of all, on behalf of my sister Mariam and myself, as well as all our family who are present here today, we would just like to thank you very much for coming to honor our parents at this memorial. We would also like to thank very much the President, Connie, all the speakers, and everybody who has helped to organize today's memorial event. I can't tell you how much we appreciate all the love and support that both my sister and I, as well as all of our family, have received over the past few weeks. I can't tell you how trying a time this has been, but without this support, I think it would have been a much worse scenario for all of us. So again, thank you very much for all the support that we've received since this tragedy began 3 weeks ago. Now, as has been mentioned, our parents impacted a lot of people, not just Mariam and myself, not just our immediate family, but everybody that they met. And nowhere was that impact felt stronger than here in Portland, and specifically Portland State University. They loved this city and university to the point that we used to joke at home that the College of Urban and Public Affairs was in fact the third child in the family. And as children always fight for time with the parents, we always fought a little bit for that time. But it was who they were. Portland State was our father and our mother, and vice versa. This is their identity. Portland is their identity. And as a result, it's also Mariam and my identities. In his 28 years as dean, our father helped to create a nationally recognized institution which has attracted students and faculty, as has been mentioned, from all over the world. His personal legacy is intrinsically tied to the success of the college. The same is true for our mother. While it may have been our father who was called the Dean of Deans, it was our mother who supported him and enabled him to have the public success he did. In addition, our mother was heavily involved in a variety of PSU initiatives, from fundraising for student scholarships to the library, which now has her name on it. Together, our parents relentlessly served both PSU and the broader Portland community. They traveled all over the world, but always felt most comfortable in our adopted home of Portland. While the administrative demands of being a dean can be all-encompassing, my father never forgot that he was a teacher and mentor first and foremost. Though building the college took much of his time, both he and our mother were always present in the life of students and faculty of the college. What really struck me the other day at the funeral last week was how similar all the reflections were, regardless of whether people were talking of our parents' private or public lives. They were genuine through and through. They deeply cared for others and empathized with those less fortunate. And while some may have been at times intimidated at first encounter, particularly when it comes to our father, as has been mentioned, they both had true hearts of gold and went the extra distance to help others. And I can't say anything more in terms of how that applied to our family. Our family was by far first and foremost in their lives, and both my sister and I are extremely grateful for that. They would do anything for us. They made sacrifices left and right for us. They never went on a vacation by themselves without us until I think we were in our 20s, okay? Which means we also went on family vacations until we were in our 20s. But those are all moments which we all cherished and which we will cherish for the rest of our lives. They defended us in all circumstances. I still remember before I found the sports I was actually good at, I tried a few others, including baseball, a sport which neither of our parents had any real clue as to how it worked or played, but that didn't stop them from coming to support me out in the Robert Gray baseball fields. And I was no Babe Ruth as a baseball player, but that didn't stop our parents from cheering, and in many cases having to defend us against sort of the complaints of other parents about my performance. But the reality is I pitied more those parents because I pity whoever tries to let's say, challenge or say anything offensive to a child of the Toulans, because while their compassion is deep and extensive, so can be their wrath. Okay, so we were always in a bubble with them. They always protected us. They always made sure that we felt safe and secure. This compassion for others extended not just to their immediate family, but to everybody they really touched. I have to say the outpouring of support the past couple of weeks from students and former faculty members from all over the world has been astounding. And it just reinforced to us the impact our parents had on the lives of so many people, not just here in Portland, but people now who are spread throughout the rest of the world. Both of our parents, as has been alluded to, shared an intrinsic commitment to public service. As I mentioned last week, they truly believe that one does not only live in a community, but rather actively participates in and shapes it. As urban planners, they understood that planning means nothing if it is devoid of social justice and concern for the public welfare. To quote my father from his retirement speech, "Many will stipulate that the ultimate product of planning is reflected in the physical form of our city. And they are right up to a point. The reality that a city where social justice is lacking and where the voice of citizens is unheard is a city that none of us would want to live in, no matter how aesthetically pleasing it may be." Our parents were both, thank you. Our parents were both people of strong conviction and beliefs, and together they provided a formidable team. They pushed each other, as well as others, as has also been alluded to succeed. Okay. They never acquiesced when they believed in something, and were always driven by principle and not personal gain. Though our parents came from different parts of the world and different cultures, they shared many traits, particularly when it came to fundamental values. Central to their beliefs was the importance of education and the opportunities it affords not only the individual, but the community as a whole. A well-functioning educational system is fundamental for a prosperous society. And it was this conviction which inspired me to follow in their footsteps into academia. At the same time, both of our parents believed in the importance of hard work and personal integrity, and that as individuals we are in charge of our own destinies. As immigrants to this country, they worked diligently for everything they achieved, at the same time supporting one another. While our parents shared a set of core values and beliefs, they did indeed come from different parts of the world to which they were fiercely loyal. They were proud of their origins and ardently devout practitioners of their respective religions. The fact that they were able to make both work in harmony for nearly 50 years, to give you a little side note, this Friday would have been the 50th anniversary of their civil wedding. They were married the day JFK was shot by a justice of the peace named George Washington in Philadelphia. But just to reiterate, the fact that they were able to make this work in harmony for nearly 50 years should serve as a lesson to many of us that accepting another's differences does not have to mean abandoning your own beliefs, and that if we understand that, the road to compromise is much easier. Fiercely loyal to each other, their faiths, their family, their friends, and their community, this loving couple will be sorely missed, not only by Mariam and myself and the rest of our family, but by everyone they touched. Both Mariam and I are immensely proud of our parents and their legacy. We hope that the generations of students and faculty, which are still to come, will be able to benefit from that legacy and go on to espouse the ideals of our parents when it comes to civic duty and responsibility. Thank you very much for all the support and all the respect you have paid to our parents. It does mean the world to us. Thank you very much.
Wow. I think that just to echo one thing that Omar just said was that what was very clear was that the public and private Nohad and Dirce were the same people, and they were really solid people. And I think that we all feel very fortunate that they touched our lives, that this extraordinary couple were parts of our lives. If you're like me, this service has led you to recall the special moments that you were lucky enough to have had with them. We will miss them dearly. But they're not gone, right? They live in the memories that we hold, and more importantly, in the commitment that they shared with us to a vision of tolerance, equity, and justice, of service to others, of letting knowledge serve the city. Nohad and Dirce cared deeply about the future, and they were very deliberate and generous. They invested in people, as we heard from Annette, invested so heavily in their students, but also in the faculty, as we have enjoyed, those of us here. They invested in people, and one of the last acts that they did was to begin the Nohad and Dirce Toulan Endowed Scholarship Fund. They very deliberately set this up, actually just earlier this year. And if you would like us to help keep their dream alive in educating the students into the future, keeping their vision alive, please, there are gift envelopes on the tables here. But I think that is our responsibility, we who have been so gifted by having known this extraordinary couple. Thank you all for coming. I'd also like to thank the Toulan family, Mariam and Omar, for sharing your parents with us, because we all feel like they're children or something like that. The speakers who shared your memories, who I think put to life many of the memories that we all share in our own ways, right? But it's wonderful how you all presented. Thank you especially to Nohad and Dirce, who had these beautiful lives for which we would not be able to share these moments together without. So thank you, Nohad and Dirce. I know they can hear me. Before we all leave, I want to invite you to share in some refreshments at the back of the room and continue to kind of share our memories of this wonderful couple. Thank you.